So the first most practical truth that CIA tells us is that you can't destroy the bias in your brain. Remember how we were talking about your brain works against you? What we're talking about specifically is something called a cognitive bias. Cognitive biases are well studied, well known, but they can't be overcome. The best you can do is understand that they're there and have red flags to identify them when they happen. And you can improve the way that your brain resists a cognitive bias, but the bias can't be destroyed. An example of that is in-group bias. We want to be accepted. That's built into our psyche. So we start to accept the beliefs of whatever group we're in. We can't avoid it. You can try to resist it, but there's always going to be a group that you're in that you accept and you adopt the beliefs of that group, unless you are truly alone. And then you're still going to do it because you're going to believe that you're part of a group of people who are truly alone. So it gets to be this game of diminishing returns when you try to fight your implicit bias. And that's what CIA teaches us. If you try to fight it, there's an optimal point of resistance, and then it's a game of diminishing returns. You're putting more energy into it than you're actually getting benefit out of it. So they teach us, practically speaking, to accept the fact that we're going to have biases. Accept it. Don't fight it. Accept it. And then also understand that you can resist to an optimal level where you gain more benefit than the energy and resources you put in. But as soon as you start fighting yourself to a place where you're spending more resources than getting benefit out of the fight, you're suboptimal now. You're suboptimal as an individual, but you're also suboptimal as a member of your community. You're suboptimal as a member of the family. You're suboptimal as a peer and a professional and a partner. So it's your responsibility to remain optimal for yourself, but for all the secondary impacts of what you do as well. So, find that truth, but understand that the journey to finding the truth, you have to be optimized to maintain the endurance it takes to seek what you're looking for, even if that means accepting along the way that you're not perfect.
That is so interesting because I think we demonize the word conformity. And yes, of course, there's truth in that. But what I'm sensing from you is saying that there's an optimal level of conformity you need to abide by because society comprises of people. And I think people like Jordan B. Peterson, Friedrich Nietzsche, and all the greats, they are the ones who just 100% went for the truth seeking and they subscribe to zero conformity. And that's why make those people great. But if you study their literature, their life, it's extremely lonely. They have no family, no love, no relationships. Because I think the absolute truth seeking requires tremendous sacrifice that people don't really think about.
You're exactly right. And that's what we're taught too. What we're taught at the agency is to understand that the person who seeks absolutes is flawed. They believe that anything can truly be absolute. And there's no evidence, there's no empirical evidence out there that anything is absolute. Even the bottle of water sitting in front of me, the microphone that I'm talking to, we have science now that demonstrates that this thing is actually not absolute. That even the physical structure itself is temporary. Quantumly, it could exist somewhere else at the same time that it's existing here. So as we learn to challenge scientifically and mathematically absolutes, you can understand why people who believe in psychological or philosophical absolutes are fundamentally flawed. And because they are flawed, they don't realize that they're flawed. And in the world of espionage and human intelligence collection, the most vulnerable people are the people who have a flaw and don't realize they have a flaw because they become susceptible to other people taking advantage and manipulating the environment around them. And very much so, without a doubt, CIA has a bad reputation. They have earned that bad reputation because their mission is to manipulate people in order to extract secrets to protect American lives. That's what we do. And if you want to talk CIA, you have to accept that that's what they do. And thank God they do it. Because if they didn't extract the secrets, Americans would be less safe. And we live in a world where there's no absolutes. But if you have to take a practical truth approach, you have to choose a side. I was born in this country. I love this country. I believe in this country. Practically speaking, I have to side with this country. Even though I believe, subjectively, I may believe that we're all global citizens. My practical truth is I have to be American first.
Yeah, as a veteran, I believe in benign shadow force, which is what CIA is. And yeah, obviously it's not a black and white world. When you demonize something, you're also not realizing you're reaping the benefits of being an American citizen. Full stop.
Yep.
So I do want to go into the practical truth a little bit. In the intro, I talked about sometimes beholder of information is burdened by the information. That applies to you more than anyone. And even for me, I know a lot of secrets and things that the guest has never told people, and I don't share them. I'm also a psychotherapist. My patients listen to my podcast. So I abide by my integrity for everyone's sake. And not just the urge for me to share these things, because I was like, only if you knew about some of these things. And I'm sure that's even for tenfold for you. So how do you navigate that? Is it more about, I know I have these certain subsets of information I can never share with the world, classified or otherwise, because you know the burdensome nature in those certain informations. Yeah, how do you navigate your internal and your world with this information that's just ever more like cumulative?
There's two parts to my answer, right? And the part that I'll start with first is the simplest part. We were recruited through a very heavy recruitment process. The vetting that we were talking about earlier, the vetting of a CIA officer, and just like the vetting of an FBI officer, is extremely rigorous. And one of the things they're looking for is the psychological data points that show that in our personality and in our own way of processing information, our core wiring, we don't carry the burden to the same level as other people or more sensitive people. So you don't know me very well yet. That'll change over the years. But I am not a very sensitive person. I mean, my friends and my family know this about me, and they're probably laughing as they listen. But I'm not insensitive, but I'm also not necessarily very sensitive. Empathy is something I had to learn. I don't naturally feel other people's pain or other people's concerns or other people's worry. If anything, I overvalue the idea that maybe they want to be told the truth. CIA taught me that people don't want to be told the truth. People like having space between the burden of truth and their own perceived version of the truth. So the first part of how I carry it is I have the psychological indicators of somebody who just bears the burden well because I don't remember the details. I've seen nasty, horrible things. I don't remember the details. So when I go to sleep at night, I don't see the bodies. I don't see the blood. I don't hear the screams. I don't feel the pain. I just don't. Even though I know I was exposed to it, I don't feel it. I don't see it. My memory didn't hold it. My brain isn't conditioned to hold on to those details. I wasn't traumatized by it. The trauma kind of rolled off my back when it happened. The second tool that's beneficial to us is to understand that people don't want to know the truth, like I mentioned. So because I don't hold the burden of those details as well as somebody else might, it's also comforting for me to know that other people don't want to know those details. So it's easier for me to let them go. As much as people hate the idea of a terrorist, and as much as people love the idea of us fighting and defeating terrorists, nobody wants to hear about how we kill terrorists, how we strategically disassemble their cells in violent ways to increase the deterrence factor of the second in command becoming the new commander of the cell. Nobody wants to hear those details. They just want to live very comfortably in the space where they know what happens, generally speaking. So I have two ways of not having to feel the pain of the burden, even though I know it's there.
Thank you for discovering more with us this week. If you enjoyed watching this video, check out the full-length episode at one of the windows that pops up. And as always, see you again in next week's train of Discover More. Thank you for tuning in.